Earlier this week, the Federal Parliament's Joint Standing Committee on Northern Australia handed down its final report on Rio Tinto's explosion of the Juukan Gorge in the Pilbara, which destroyed artefacts of cultural significance that were more than 46,000 years old. The report described the site's destruction as causing immeasurable cultural and spiritual loss, as well as profound grief to the Puutu, Kunti, Kurrama and Pinikura people. The report also highlighted issues around governance of the company from the board of Rio Tinto. Hamm is an accomplished company director and in the past has questioned if the destruction would have happened if there were Indigenous people on the board of Rio Tinto leading up to the blast. Hamm joins me now. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Dan.
Firstly, what's your reaction to this report of Parliament this week?
Yeah, look, it was quite a significant report, not only just having a look at how the Juukan Cave destruction happened, but looking more broadly at how the mining industry intersects with the Aboriginal community, particularly traditional owners. And I think it actually exposed a long-held approach by the mining sector that really needs some revisionism or revision about it, so that they don't look at Aboriginal people as something to be tolerated, but really a community or a business partner that needs to be embraced and embraced totally into the mining sector, not simply kept at arm's length and dealt with through consultation.
In the other side of that sort of course is the fact that the report said there were inadequate procedures and also mechanisms to protect cultural places of importance around the country at every level, state, territory and local.
Yes, I think what the report did was really say that how we've managed Aboriginal heritage, to be honest, I think the report may have used the words higgledy-piggledy somewhere in there, or they use terms not unlike that, that there really is a huge sublime to the ridiculous across the nation. And when you have the overlay of the federal heritage legislation, which hasn't been updated for, I think it's nearly 20 years now, there's no consistent approach. A lot of the legislation was built around and still operates as if the purpose of the legislation was to provide a framework for the destruction of Aboriginal heritage as opposed to its protection. So we really need to look at this through the eyes of the third decade of the 21st century and update all the legislations, all the protections, and have as their prime thing that the prime purpose of these acts is to protect Aboriginal heritage, and that the destruction of Aboriginal heritage should be the very last thing you go to, not the first thing you go to and find a process by which to do that. I think that's a fundamental precept, and that would also make it clear to not only the mining sector, but anybody wanting to engage with Aboriginal people around the management of heritage, that the protection of heritage and the keeping in place of heritage is the prime directive, and all else must come second to that. There's no competition about it.
There were extensive recommendations in this report, including a legislative framework for cultural heritage protection at the national level that would be co-designed and have minimum standards at state and territory level. Does that go far enough?
I think we have to look at not only co-designing the legislation and minimum standards at state and territory level, but the fundamental principle that I think we need to get to is that Aboriginal people are actually the decision makers about what happens to their heritage. In some of the proposals or some of the discussion we've seen even since that report came out and reflecting current circumstances of some jurisdiction, the ultimate decision making still resides with the minister. Now, there is a jurisdiction, Victoria, my own jurisdiction here, where the actual decision-making around cultural heritage rests with traditional owners. They're the decision maker, not the government, not a bureaucracy, not a minister. It's actually with traditional owners. That's where we need to get to. So not only involve Aboriginal people in the design of a future framework and design of a future process and design of future decision-making processes, but actually have them as the decision makers. It is, after all, our heritage. Should we not be the ones who make the decisions about it?
Well, going to decision-making, I want to stick with that theme. And the inquiry heard that, quote, decisions at the board level triggered a downstream focus on latent management and minimising issue escalation rather than true engagement and genuine partnership. That's a stinging indictment of Rio Tinto's board of governance, isn't it?
It is. It basically says it's a board that was so out of touch with what was happening on the ground and what they needed to know about how things on the ground had to work, that they regarded the Aboriginal community as stakeholders to be managed or almost tolerated, rather than thinking them as partners that we have to share with and work with and treat as partners around how we collectively benefit by what we propose doing. That's what they should have done, but they didn't. Instead, they treated the traditional owners, as I said, as stakeholders to be managed, or people who would raise issues that somehow had to be tolerated and find their way around it. As I said, that said to me that board was devoid of any knowledge in the boardroom of what they were really dealing with, which goes to a bigger issue of who is making up the boards of the mining sector companies. What do they bring to the table? Not just skills around good governance, such as legal matters or finance management, but what do they know of the people who they have to engage with and work with? What do they have in the boardrooms with that? And at the moment, I think I'd be very accurate in saying, apart from Ben Wyatt, no board at the moment would have any Aboriginal people in it, or certainly have any knowledge of Aboriginal people within them.
Is that good enough?
No, it's not. It's quite frankly, it's blatantly a terrible situation. When we speak of diversity on boards, people think that somehow de-skills a board. In my view, it actually enhances the skills of boards, because not only do you get people who are competent, what we call the skills diversity needed in a boardroom, such as I said, finance and legal, but in my view, the more important and softer skills we need going forward. Who are the communities we're dealing with? Does anybody in this boardroom know about those? What are the biggest social impacts that we have to be aware of that our business does? What are the greater outcomes that we should be contributing to as an organisation? Who around this table knows about that? Particularly in the mining sector in relation to Aboriginal people, you need to have Aboriginal people in the boardroom, not just as advisors, not to be consulted with, but fully fledged, walking, talking, tying their shoelaces and chewing gum board members who contribute not only their technical skill, that is, they might be a lawyer or they might be good at governance, but they actually bring an intimate knowledge and understanding of the Aboriginal community. They're the people we should be seeking to have in boardrooms.
Do you think there's a warning in this report to boards that don't listen to that sort of critique that you've just given, and that perhaps the tide has turned on public sentiment of boards that allow what happened at Juukan Gorge to happen in Australia?
I think the Juukan Gorge matter was actually not only just a warning, it was a punch in the nose, if you like, for boards. If you do not do something about your social responsibility beyond your social licence, but understanding the society in which you operate and your contribution to it, you're going to get whacked up really, really bad. Rio Tinto is going to take years to recover from this. Them and Woodside have appointed Ben Wyatt. They have a really long way to go in gaining public trust. I think one of the ways in which they will need to be able to do that, and other boards, is going to be appointing more people of different backgrounds to their boardrooms to bring those things that they don't have at the moment, so that they better understand their responsibility. And it's particularly true now, Dan, as we look at issues of climate change. We look at things of social responsibility. We look at transparent governance, and we want more than just corporate social responsibility. The questions the community, or the broad community and society, is asking is, where is the responsibility of these organisations to not only deliver a good profit and a return to shareholders, but give equal gravity to environmental contribution, social outcome or social commitment, to be the example of good governance that looks at more than just how much money are we making and how much profit are we returning to shareholders.
Yeah, a strong warning indeed. Ian Hamm, we will have to leave it there, but Accomplished Company Director, great to have you on the program this afternoon.
Always a pleasure, Dan.